Welcome to the Grow Renaissance podcast. Let's nourish the world.
Welcome back to Pasture Prime Time, a Grow Renaissance podcast hosted by me, Neil Smith. Today, I'm very privileged to have joining us as a guest, Sophie Brauns from RIPE. She is the Director of Growth and Partnerships for Rural Investments. And we're excited to hear about her journey and really what they're doing over at that venture and that business and how they're affecting agriculture. As you know, Pasture Prime Time is a conversation focused around understanding the stories in agriculture, the good, the bad, the ugly, the warts and all, really to ensure that you, the listeners, are getting a full grasp of what's happening in our agriculture market, both locally and internationally. And so, Sophie, thank you very much for making some time this morning and jumping on the call here with me. Today's Friday morning. Both of us are actually heading out to New York next week for Climate Week, where we're really going to be meeting a lot of thought leaders and progressive individuals in the realm of sustainability and climate impact, as well as regenerative agriculture. And so I thought this was a really good opportunity to connect and talk about some of the things that we're seeing in agriculture from our own perspectives and our own lenses. So as I pass the mic over to you here to introduce yourself, one, I'd love to hear a bit about your journey, where where it's taken you and how you've ended up where you are. And then I'd love for you to share with the audience what is working in agriculture. What are some of the positive things that you see happening? We're going to talk about some of the things that maybe aren't working so well, but let's dive into what's working well.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor. And a little bit about me is I grew up in Southern Maryland. I grew up next to Buddy Hance, who is a huge, sixth generation farmer in Maryland. He was the Secretary of Ag of Maryland, particularly around that time when there was the big tobacco buyout. All these farmers around us from Virginia to North Carolina, could have been a couple other states, they were taking this buyout and they're transitioning their farms. And so it was really powerful to see that. I went to school with his children and things like that. And that kind of it was something that made me curious. I was raised by two hippies that we composted from the beginning. So that was something that was always in me, is you want to know where your food is from. Mm-hmm. So then fast forward that I'm in school, I'm double majoring in business and leadership studies. I'm running leadership conferences at Qatar University. I'm seeing these buses of young men to build up Doha. And I have two older brothers. And I was like, holy moly, these could be Berto and Josh. What is going on? Mm. So then I went back to the States and I worked for SEIU. I did political organizing, and then we did membership engagement, and then we were lobbying for a variety of things. And part of the demographic that I was representing in North Carolina was the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. And so they were talking about water quality, and that's where Smithfield is. Mm-hmm. And it was just appalling to me at the time that there was just 3 water quality testers for the entire state. And you're just it didn't math for me. Anyway, so I was in this, doing all of this, and I get a cancer scare. And I was like, holy moly, this is just a change of trajectory. I didn't know what to do. I decided, okay, I'm going to go back to school for biochemistry, do a post-bac for pre-med studies. And I actually called Tony Salas and was like, what do I do? And he's like, you need to come down to Peru and go to Iquitos and spend time with the Shipibo tribe. And so I did that as well. And then I went back to school, and it was in that program, it was Martin Luther King Day or something like that. And I went to the Smithsonian because they were doing this yoga and the art of medicine exhibit. And I heard Dr. Lorenzo Cohen from MD Anderson speak. He was running their integrative medicine department at the time. And I was like, dude, I want to work with that guy. I want to figure it out. And so I did. I went down to Houston, got that internship. But what I saw the most is that we've got to really be aware of what we're putting in our bodies in all the ways, you know? And so like I'm a big yogi, so like I understand like that. Like I love Kundalini, like I love all that like energy and all of that, but I mean, come on, we're like floating in a ball in the middle of the space and there's like all these galaxies and wormholes. Like if we're just like going to talk about it, like we need to be aware that we're a part of a larger scope.
Yeah.
So then I turned hard and went into agriculture. Like there was a time in my life where my coworkers were picked up in Lowe's parking lot, and I wanted to know how it was. So like I worked in, on a farm in southern Texas and had to change my clothes 4 times a day, and
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
I've worked for other farms, and so what I've realized from this like nexus of legality, this nexus of health, and the actual work that's required to maintain an agricultural practice is very interwoven.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that nothing can be built structurally on top of policy that does not support it. That's a relationship. That's like our nation. That's anything. If the foundation is not solid, it will crumble. That's architecture. That's structure, development. And so that's what I started leaning into when I engaged with Tony Salas and shared X and seeing how they developed out that infrastructure in Latin and South America. That's what I was really interested in when I decided to move back to Maryland and work for the Southern Maryland Development Commission, Agricultural Development Commission, and just seeing how regional agriculture centers were being built and how local farmers were being connected to schools.
Mm-hmm.
And now with Ripe, it's just this like sweet spot that we've hit, because Ripe, basically they're the way that they're engaged with their board, the way that they're led by a coalition. That was when I was like, yes, sign me up, because we can come up with every idea in the book for why something is right or why something should be done. But if the
Mm-hmm.
people that are doing the actual work aren't bought in or don't have a voice, it will not happen. And so
Mm-hmm.
Eliza Drews, who started Ripe in 2017, I think she's super brilliant, and Trey's picking up from there. Her idea that like we need it from producers and we need it staged in successes is not only like what Ripe is said they're going to do, but it's actually what's happening. And as someone who values like extreme authenticity and transparency, I'm really excited for what this journey holds.
That's amazing. And just for our listeners, RIPE is Rural Investments to Protect Our Environment, if I got that acronym correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. And it was a privilege when I actually stumbled across your coalition, your group, because it really spoke to the same ethos that Grow has, which is transparency and trust. How do we continue to bridge the gap between production agriculture, or industrial agriculture, as some people call it, and those smallhold, medium-sized farms that are often caught in the crossfire of what's happening at the beholdens to policy regulations and county or state, or in Canada, province, and governmental oversights. And so, continuing to have a voice and continue to advocate for specific needs that are very bioregionally focused, or hypo-localization, is so important. But the underlying thread is exactly the same as you, which is transparency. And so we need to know the good, the bad, the ugly, the warts and all, because we need to have better conversations. If we only have conversations about certain components, we're missing the bigger picture. And I think that's really where policy, to me, has dropped the ball a little bit, because they focus on specific issues that are related to maybe a carte blanche statement that's trying to cover the whole nation,
Mhm.
and or state, and they're not being as focused or as hyper localized in understanding the needs, even in different counties, between county and county, if it's grain growers, if it's producers of any sort, the needs can be different. And even the water rights, the land rights, the mineral rights, we start to get into a lot of complexities. So very, very happy to have RIPE out there and advocating for a voice. And you've had quite the journey. I think you've mentioned to me in a couple of conversations pieces of that, but to hear, sort of that whole journey and even that life event that really sort of sparked okay, well, what do we need to do today that is going to leave some legacy or impact? And really that was what I was getting from your story is, these life events sort of change our perspective, and they give us new ideas on how we can actually make a mark in this world.
Mhm.
And the one thing I really, really picked up on, and if you've listened to any of our past podcasts and those that have engaged with me, I talk about frequency a lot. Frequency
Mhm.
in the earth, and feeling the frequency out when you're out in nature. When we eat our food, the end of life of animals, animal welfare, that frequency is embedded into how we're eating or consuming. That goes into vegetables as well. And so the care and the energy that we put out into our ecosystem, and really, whether we're raising or growing food, that's translated into how we're actually going to be feeling. And there's a lot of great studies around that, and how we can quantify energy and relate it to health, human health at the end of the day. So it's really
Yes.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally believe in the frequency too. Sometimes I think like the future of food, like if you're going to get like very into it, is like food energetics. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I think there's like going to be like bionutrient meters and all of that, like nutrient density. And then I think it's going to be like food energetics. And I mean, there's so many studies like that Japanese study on like water, the energy
Yeah.
of like, and then like speaking to plant, like, yeah, it's out there. It's real.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah, there's a great company called Living Water. They've got an office in Florida. They come from somewhere over in Europe, and they're doing some really neat things with energy harmonics and
Mm,
crystals. Basically, you put it into water, and it's restructuring water component. And
yeah.
in animals in specific, which is right up my alley, it's something I really love. And livestock, it's reducing the amount of water that is needed to be consumed, because structured water actually is retained within the animal more effectively than non-structured water. And you can think about foods that we eat, foods that are silver bullets that go in and come out, that don't really provide a lot to us. But when we start structuring food with nutrients that our body needs, it's totally different. And, to do that with water. So I'm really paying attention to that. And also EMF. Um,
Oh
there's
yeah.
a great company. It's actually on Grow's Nourish Mart, which is our commerce site, called Spiro. And they've got discs that they're putting in barns, and it's reducing the EMF. It's basically, it's not blocking it, because we can't block EMFs, but it's restructuring it again, I guess is the right word to use. And it's reducing the harmful effects. And so animals are more calm. They're not being affected by the EMF as much as they were in the past. Reductions of like 60 or 70%. These studies are showing. And so these little techniques, these little tools that we're using to really change the welfare of our ecosystem as a whole, and this goes into plants and animals and the soils, and we forget about that whole ecosystem underneath the soil that also needs to be thought about when we think about EMF and energy and frequencies. Um, so I'm really excited about some of that technology coming to fruition here, and being able to plug into it to get us closer to that end goal of a fully regenerative ecosystem. Because I continue to believe that regeneration is an end goal. That today, I haven't met anyone that's doing regenerative, has created a regenerative system, a fully regenerative system. We're working on it. And I often think a little bit like a codependency on any drug. We have to rehabilitate, and then we have to resuscitate, maybe resuscitate and then rehabilitate. And then we need to start creating resiliency. So we need to start moving with new tool structures, new systems, and really understand what the ecosystem is telling us. And then finally we get to regeneration. So we're
Yeah.
multiple steps away from regeneration. There's a lot of things happening, whether it's centropic farming that's out there, whether it's focused on just functionality of soil. And I think the term functional soil versus soil health is a more appropriate term, because we need our soil to be functional, meaning it's
Mm.
got the right microbiology for your bioregion. It's got the water holding capacity. It's got the effective nutrient capturing capacities, and that changes.
Yeah.
Soil health, we can quantify soil health. Is it productive? Yeah, it's growing a plant. We can quantify it's got X number of micro macronutrients, but are they functioning in a symbiotic relationship? I.e., are they regenerating? Are they doing the things that are needed? And so,
I'm really
um,
into that. I'm into that a lot. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah.
it's cool.
And I guess where I was going with all of this is I'd love your take on some of the terminology we use, or your thoughts and perspectives on how greenwash, whitewash, overuse certain terms are in agriculture, and what you're seeing from an association or a coalition as it relates to policy. Are they the buzzwords overclouting some of the functionality of writing the right policies? Just give me some of your
Yeah.
thoughts on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Something I love is that math is beautiful. And so I think that, and I also love that quote, like the more beautiful question, the more beautiful answer, something like that,
Yeah, I love
like,
that. Yeah.
yeah. And I think what you're saying about soil function is really important because when someone says it's regenerative, I don't know what that means anymore. The term itself is almost completely greenwashed at this point, in my opinion. Something that we try to strive for is at Ripe is to be like in the conversation. So we say regenerative because search engine optimization and there's like a variety of other things, relatability now, like what has been the narrative in the public space. But if we're really going to talk about soil function, then we're going to talk about conservation agriculture. And
Mm-hmm.
that is something that's regional. I mean, heck, if you've ever been on a farm, that's farm to farm. That's plot of land to plot of land. So if we think about our body, you wouldn't treat your finger the same way you treat your knee. If you go to a knee surgeon, you go to a hand surgeon. So I hope that kind of gets to where you were going.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think it underpins that really well. You're picking up what I'm swathing, so I like it. Yeah, maybe you can share a little bit. We started talking about your journey, and I don't think we actually got to some of the things that you see going well in agriculture. I'd still love to hear
Oh,
some of your
yeah.
thoughts.
Things I see going well. I see the open mindedness of farmers going well, the receptivity to come to the table. They want solutions. And
Mm.
so I'm always in awe of farmers. And so, you know, that is definitely going well. I think another thing that's going well are the conversations that we're having with like the administration at USDA. We myself, I consider myself bipartisan, nonpartisan in ways. Ripe also
Yeah.
identifies in that manner. But I will say that like having our past board president as the USDA number 3, FSA administrator, those type of people that we know how they think, we know how they engage in groups, that is going to be a very good thing that will go well for agriculture, at least USA minded. But, we're a global economy at this point, and US agriculture is also part of that global economy. And so I'm excited about that. I'm excited about, recent news that we hear about big names like McDonald's coming into regenerative and, just things like that. I think I always want to remember that idea. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. It's like, I'm always about people. I'm all about rehabilitation. I think like that's in our justice system. Like a lot of my time in my life was like against prison privatization. I think
Mm.
there's got to be this aspect of rehabilitation is always in our conversation. That's always in our toolbox. And so I think that is going well in our ag space. I always am like a champion for other organizations. So like MADS, capital raise, like surpassing their goal, like incredible. Um, I think the idea that we were able to save $13.1 billion for Title II of the Farm Bill, amazing. That's where like a lot of our conservation stuff's going to come out of. And since like having strong relationships, I'm really excited for the future. I'm really excited for us all to have authentic conversations about where we want the future of our civilization to go.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think there's a lot of great things there. I want to pick up on a thread here. you mentioned McDonald's and the big announcement that just happened here. And I know it's probably a bit of a polarized announcement. We've seen the likes of General Mills and PepsiCo and other large CPGs certainly make their foray into what they call enabling regenerative agriculture or more sustainable practices through their capital initiatives. Do you think that some of the drive around this announcement with McDonald's is
PR?
PR, feel good kind of a component? And do you
Oh
think
my
that,
gosh, yes.
yeah, great. Dancing around that one I was, but yeah, you called it right out. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess when farmers hear that, you work with a coalition of farmers, you're really engaged with farmers. What do you think their sentiments are? I'd love to hear your thoughts around some of that. How they're
They're
going to
probably
view it.
like, what the hell does that mean? Like, what does that mean actually? And like when PepsiCo does their stuff, like, God bless any organization that's navigating this field. Like, I know it's complex and I know they have GHG reporting. And I know that there's no clarification on like if that corn is that corn when you buy it, or if that corn is that carbon when you buy it, or that cow is that methane when you buy it. So,
Yeah.
I mean, congratulations. And also like the conversation continues, and the math is there. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I guess the one thing that I always find is, how does that money actually trickle down to the farm gate, right? And it seems to
exactly.
be there's a lot of intermediaries, and I find this. I mean, maybe this is a good area to sort of drill into and peel the onion on. I find in all these great initiatives that we have, and call it the carbon market space, call it some of the CBG capital initiatives, call them other groups, associations that are really driven to get capital. It's a two-sided marketplace for all of them. I understand that capital comes into capital deployment, but a lot of it gets caught up in the messy middle, and
Hmm.
a fraction of it, and it varies, but a fraction of it gets down to the farm gate. And so how do we expand that? Where's the conversation? Where does policy play a role in opening up the channels to go from these initiatives where there's capital and get more into the farm level or the farm gate level?
So there's got to be farmer sovereignty. They've got to be able to maintain and manage their own. And that has historically shown true as well. There's been, if you look at the farm economy in the US in the 1980s and what happened,
Yeah.
there's got to be sovereignty. I also think that there's got to be questions. I think that, what will it take for a farmer to transition, to de-risk their transition from, industrial ag to regenerative conservation agriculture? It's got to be at least $50 an acre. That's like what it's going to take when it comes down to numbers. And so any company that's coming in to say that they're doing a regenerative play, yes, 100%. My yoga teacher always says if you want something, you have to do everything to get it. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you'll get it on the pathway to doing everything, but maybe you'll have to do everything to get it. But I think that like we've got to math it out. Like, okay, so what's that? Syngenta's giving or Bayer or whatever. Bayer's giving a $5 back an acre for cover crops.
Yeah.
That's not going to move the needle if that's not, and so if farmers aren't at the table for these large orchestrations, I sometimes worry. I worry exactly what you're saying. Where
Yeah.
does it get to them?
Yeah. And I guess one of the things, and it's kind of what we're doing at Grow, that's why I'm excited to work with Ripe. But it's flipping the script so we have different conversations, because I think these conversations that we've had to date are advocating for one side of the coin or one side of the fence, but forgetting about how to transition that down to the farm gate. And
Yes.
sovereignty for farmers is great. And if we can find ways to build elasticity and resiliency in their balance sheets, then they're less dependent on some of these subsidies or capital opportunities. Then it's less dependent in and less of a PR statement. The capital's there, And we have to have different conversations on how to have more productive use of that capital versus right now, which I find farmers are in such a tight spot that they really want it. And when they don't get it, or they've worked hard to try to acquire it, and the money's deployed in different pilots and in different regions or focused only on one area, they feel disheartened, and they're left feeling, that's great. These are great stories, but we're not seeing that needle move. And so how do we create a new rail path, a railway, or a pathway for farmers to build resiliency, less dependent on these capital initiatives, so that when those capital initiatives come out, they're totally different conversations. We're engaging with the likes of McDonald's or Syngenta or Bayer and saying, your capital is great, may or may not move the needle. It's less important now because that capital is actually going to be demonstrating an output of what we can do, whether it's regenerative or just resiliency within the ecosystem, conservation or otherwise. The end goal being, more nutritious food for our consumers, less complexity in the supply chain, less centralization, and that's really where I think some of the needle changes are going to happen. But we have to think about the capital a little bit differently. And right now we've pushed farmers into the corner, and so they feel like they're dependent on it and they can't access it, and so it's a double-edged sword for them.
Okay, yeah, you hit on a lot of points, so I'm going to try to remember it. I may ask you to say some of that again.
Yeah.
But okay, so what I see happening right now is farming the farmer. It's oh, how can we make regen an asset class? And I don't know a lot of farmers that are going to be at Climate Week. You know what I mean? So who's having these conversations? Are they just 5 farmers are going to be there, and then the rest is and if you're involved in agriculture, it doesn't mean you're just a farmer, but they're the ones on the ground. So let's talk about it. Also, something to put in perspective is for 3 consecutive years, farmers have lost money. So we're not in a great spot for farmers. And the more that we have all these different ideas coming at them, it's just going to confuse. And we're talking about, this is a really unique thing. I love a lot of we're a young nation, and it's not like we're in Japan where there's tons of generations that stay in one thing. This is kind of the only thing in the US that's like that. And so if you're going to start to totally transform how they're going to talk to each other at the dinner table or whatever, if the power isn't going to the farmer primarily, it will not work long term. And all that I want to do is have a durable impact. We talk about wanting to change food or all that. We need to look at the commodities. If the commodities are not grown in a way that is going to have a functional soil or is not going to uptick the nutrient density, then everything else that's the grass tops will not have the impact if we change the policy for what's happening at the commodity level.
Yeah, I agree. I like that word, durability. I think that's a good one. I'm going to steal that. Creating a durable.
I'm taking your functional soil.
Perfect. It's a good swap. What are some of the other things that you're seeing in the world of sustainability? I'm sure you run into with your coalition this whole world of environmental credits, crediting system that was supposed to be a great opportunity for farmers, and we've kind of, I think, hit the tipping point quite a few years ago of it being ineffective. And at New York, we're both going down there, myself as a farmer and representing an organization that is really trying to change perspectives. But we're going to be speaking to a lot of thought leaders in this world of sustainability, which is in conjunction with agriculture, right? It sort of aligns with it. But I'd love to hear some of your thoughts around this world of sustainability. Maybe it's akin to conservation, and particularly around environmental credits. How does that play a role in the work that you're doing?
Environmental credits, for carbon, is that what you mean? As far as that,
carbon, biodiversity, watershed improvements, methane avoidance. Yeah,
I think that's something we're trying to tackle directly at RIPE, and I think that's something that I'm going to vet out at Climate Week personally. Who do I feel frequency from that is doing a transparent job? That is not, I was on this Reuters thing a couple weeks ago, and I was trying to ask some direct questions, and it was just like the dance of the ages across that panel for like avoiding it. And I think that like environmental credits need to be clear. Okay, who are we getting these credits from? Farmers. Farmers are already working very hard. They can join these associations to have like a collective narrative to represent them, but like if it doesn't make sense, then it's not going to work. And so I think that what we're trying to do is potentially see who would be good, transparent partners to make this a reality that is good with the farmers and good for the planet.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. And I think you and I are having some conversations around that too, about some of the things that Grow is doing differently in that aspect, as a selfish plug. But
I want to know
the,
more about that. So like that's what so I love this. So um I love the idea of Grow because it empowers the farmer. And I think that, you know, we have to do further vetting as far as like a ripe representative, but you know, we're having these conversations because it feels like the sovereignty is delivered back. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so really quickly, and for some of our listeners that may not know, one of the applications on our blockchain is called EcoMint. And it was our take. We had a lot of our farmers, and if you're listening, thank you very much for continuing to nudge us and push us to take a look at these environmental credit programs that are out there. You know, there's capital that potentially could be accessed. There's good work. There's practices, and farmers should be rewarded for it. And so, how do we tap into that? And that's one of the way where we can maybe access some of that money that we just talked about from the likes of McDonald's and other organizations that have requirements for reporting, whatever that may be, scope, ESG, GHG. But we really at Grow just said, you know, look, the industry is a little bit broken. Not a little bit, very broken. It's ineffective and it's full of bureaucracy. There's too many intermediaries that are cutting out the farmers' opportunity for actually recognizing good returns or rewards out of it. So we just created a new sandbox. And we said, you know, we don't need registries and marketplaces where credits are sitting there and buyers are coming to find, you know, the credits. There's an abundance of credits and not enough buyers that are buying. That should be a huge indicator. Two, there's too many methodology companies. There's too many self-proclaiming leaders that are really overcomplicated, very, very costly, and, you know, really just don't develop the rigor that's needed. And they don't take into account all the good work for a lot of farmers that have put in years and years of effort to, you know, call it conservation, call it sustainable, call it regenerative. They're all akin to the same thing, which is improving your ecological environment, and whether it's soil based or biodiversity based or otherwise, you know, that needs to be recognized. And so what we do with the blockchain, right from a project initiation, we first of all demonstrate to the farmer that they can build their own project plan. We co-develop that with a potential buyer or buyers, so we really understand what the output of that data needs to be. We then you know, reduce the intermediaries by, you know, 90 to 98% in terms of who's involved and how many times we need to do MRV, measure, record, and validate, basically milestone check-ins to make sure that things are progressing in the right direction. We really lean into measurements versus modeling and really try to play into, you know, things that are tangible. But right from the get-go, all the information is in a ledger on the blockchain. And so that information isn't being manipulated. It isn't being challenged because of inconsistencies. It's got to be transparent, you know, to the nth degree. It's got to be trustworthy, and that's what the blockchain delivers. This is really, really important when we come to issuance of those credits, and we can actually transaction that on our blockchain. We mint them in tools like NFTs and transaction them with decentralized finance, which inherent benefits. But even before that, it reduces the due diligence time. So a lot of these crediting programs, there's all this hard work, and then there's this long lag period because there's due diligence that needs to go on because the data needs to be vetted. Is the data good? Does the data actually meet? How many times was it touched? Is it being manipulated? All that kind of things that are happening today in most of these programs. We've taken that down from months down to weeks and even days, depending on the complexity, because the blockchain is doing the work for us. And so the farmers are fully involved all the way along. And I really believe, we don't need project developers out there. We need farmers, fully committed and fully in there. Now, they're already busy. And so, some people say, hey, they don't have time for this. I bet you somebody in their group, in their farm operations would want to spearhead this. And there are wonderful associations that might have a coalition, might have some people that say, hey, we can help you out for, a fraction of what these project developers, these intermediaries are charging. And I'm not trying to point fingers at people scratching a living that have inherently good intentions. They just are overcomplicating a system that I don't think needs complication. And so we're streamlining the process. We're really leveraging the technology of Web3 and blockchain to have different conversations. And to ensure that there's rigor and transparency. When I talk about different conversations, we get to the issuance of those credits. Then we can actually talk about secondary markets, tertiary markets with the buyers, how they can, actually create digital assets out of those credits so they don't have to burn them against their reporting. They can actually put them on their balance sheet. And so we're starting to talk about this whole world of new opportunity with digital assets, call it tokenizing real world asset componentry that hasn't been available. And that also has a trickle effect, I should say, back down to the farmer that can also monetize or be a recipient of some of that added benefit of these digital assets. And so when you talk about sovereignty, we've developed that process. We're doing that process. And everything I've talked about, we have use cases for. So one of the things that we're very, very cautious of it and hold very dear to what we do at Grow is we don't want to talk about things unless we've done it at least twice. Good science always says you have to do it 3 times to be, true science. We kind of take the line, if we can do it twice, we've demonstrated good use cases, and then we get into the third one, in representation of other people wanting to utilize it. So, it's really exciting. And I'm actually heading down to New York because I've been asked to come speak on a soapbox about challenging the system. I was just in Chicago doing the same thing. Again, not to point fingers, but to create a little bit of friction and get people a little bit, on their heels to start thinking differently about this specific niche market called environmental credits, or the carbon market space, as a whole. And I really think there's too many credits on the market. I mean, there's credits for everything these days. And the ones that really move the needle are the ones that we know about, which is more carbon coming down, CD into the ground. That's good. Or gases in general. So, removal of gas emissions into the ground, we know that's positive. Watershed improvement, it's measurable and it's recognizable. When we start to think about methane avoidance, and it doesn't have to be a livestock, but it's a gas. But there's certainly ties to animals or animal husbandry where we can actually measure. We can actually measure the components there. And then the fourth one, I'm getting my head wrapped around it. It's still a bit opaque to me because it's less measurable, but it's biodiversity. But by and large, you can see the biodiversity change when you start improving some of these other factors. And so, is there a recognition or reward mechanism that can come from that? And in large, I'm saying, okay, let's give it a shot. And if we can reward farmers for improving the biodiversity, which leads into ecosystem or conservation improvement, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, and I think, natural systems evoke natural systems. So if you have a healthy watershed of, input, you'll have a healthy watershed of output. And so I think that that's a really important part of all of this. And I think that there's going to be a large education component. I think that there needs to be a partnership of like what you're talking about, and policy wise, there's got to be some clarification on different things to marry the two. But maybe this is, more of a personal take at the moment, but I'm right on board with you about how this is going to play out. That's going to be transformative in a truly positive collective way, because otherwise it's going to be too many errant activities. Yeah.
I agree. So looking forward to continuing that conversation as we start sort of nearing the end of our conversation here in this wonderful dialogue that we've had. I'd love to turn the floor over to you just to talk about some of the things that are going on at Ripe. Where can the audience find you? Where are, what speaking engagements outside of New York are you going to be at? What events? If there's farmers that want to reach out to you and start engaging in your coalition or asking you questions, what does that look like? Maybe you can give a little bit of a insight into some of those things and share with our audience a little more about Ripe's initiatives.
Yeah, of course. So, me personally, I'll be at Climate Week, and then I'm going to the Investing in Regenerative Finance one in Minneapolis, the beginning of October. I think
Yep.
it's like the 6th through the 9th. Are you going to be there?
I'm not, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm going to be
Okay.
down in South America. So
Psh, wait,
yeah,
that's awesome. Okay, and then for coalition engagement, Morgan Reich is our director of industry engagement. So she's like kind of, not kind of, she leads all of that up, and she's awesome at what she does. She runs a farm out in Nebraska. She's a corn farmer, and so there's that. We're working on a policy piece that will elevate our current pilot we have with Virginia Tech right now. So it's an $80 million pilot. It runs in 4 states. It's what we kind of vet all of our policy. So it's like coalition, then we run it, then we move it. And so that's like so successful right now. It's funny because like now we're like working on a certificate out of it, and now you've got like Agspire, Ag, or what's the other ones? Shucks, is Agspire another one? And it's very, very interesting when you quantify something; it has a value.
right. Like Regenified, like is that kind of certification. The Land Lakes one, I forget the name of it right now. Field to market certification, and those kind
Feel
of. Okay.
well. So there's like that whole like certification, like are you regenerative or are you not? But also there's this idea of like what do I have as a farmer certification, as far
Mm-hmm.
as credits are concerned. So that's something that's really neat. That's really at math. So we're
Yeah,
hopefully in the near term going to, announce another huge win on that to make that a larger spread across our nation. Um,
does
so
this allow farmers to get different premiums on the products coming off of their farm? Is it, what is that certification or that announcement of what they have symbolize? What's in it for the farmer, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
yeah. So what's in it for the farmers, they know what credits they have. And so this is still in development. We're just starting to realize that when you give incentives to a farmer to de-risk their transition to regenerative agriculture, there's a lot of other, it's why are we getting to regenerative agriculture, conservation agriculture? It's not just for it is the end goal, but it's building a healthier earth, a healthier food system, a healthier future. And so it's starting to quantify that. And it's an attractive quantification because companies need that to meet
Mm-hmm.
their reporting standards. So that's really interesting. And so we're working on building that out. We're working on making things easier for farmers to know what is exactly something they could do in their region that would make them more successful in both their farming practice, but also financially, and setting themselves up for a future that is more stable than what our farmers have been able to rely on in the past.
I love it. So a little bit akin to the ethos that I have, which is diversify their balance sheet, is really what you're doing, right? Is finding the elasticity that allows them a little more breathing room, allows them to operate a little bit differently because we've created that diversification in the balance sheet, and we focus so heavily of that. When we think about conservation or regenerative, resilient systems that we're changing in our farm practices, we're diversifying the fields, we're diversifying livestock, we're diversifying, crop types, nature-based solution additives. But we tend to forget about that balance sheet. And that balance sheet, I think, is where we need to start and say, where are the points of elasticity, and where do we, have opportunity to diversify? And I think I'm picking up what you're swathing in terms of you're really creating a repository to identify what they currently have and what could be available so that they can plug that into their financial model that they're building, or their budget, so let's call it, and understand how it's going to be a neutral, negative, or positive, and then ask questions on how to continue to create positive impacts along the way to any one of those tracks.
Yes. Farmers are great entrepreneurs that deliver us what we need to survive 3 times a day, and so if we can help them, we can help ourselves. And yeah, I'm really excited. I'm excited for the policy backing behind this. I'm excited to see where thought leaders are going to develop products that can partner with that. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Just as we get close to the end here, I usually try to keep these conversations about 45 minutes. I'm very curious on any technologies that you see coming into the ag world that you think are really, really neat, that you could share with our listeners.
In addition to grow, which I think is very disruptive and positive on the other side.
Thank you.
I think totally. I really like precision agriculture. This could be a touchy subject, but I don't think a lot of people know what's on the other side if you remove glyphosate. Like, I'm not I buy Dove, my son who's 3, like organic things, but it's like atrazine. So that changes the sex of frogs. And so I think while we're in this development of things that work, because as we know, agriculture is about yield. So it's quantity, not quality. And that's stacked up through crop insurance, everything.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be an actually helpful thing for our farmers. There's a lot of cool technology that's out there, but things that have true sticking value, I would say those are the 2 that I really like personally. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I'm always curious because there's so much out there. And so, it's great to hear. And as I've gotten to know you, Sophie, I think we have a lot of synergies in how we think. And, the stickiness of things is really where I lean into as well. What's going to have applicability today and scalable into tomorrow, and that stickiness that moves the needle, that has that farm gate, thought built into it, not just profit in dollars or yield functionality.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's wonderful.
I also always like to think of this idea that, Mexico City, like the indigenous people that were in Mexico City prior, they were having their farms on these like floating rafts and the water around it. And so I always try to remember that, having an innovative agriculture system is what our humanity is about. So to embrace it and to become a part of that transition is really, it's a really beautiful thing to do and be in.
Amazing. I think that's a wonderful thought to end on. Embrace the innovation, embrace the opportunities. You said that beautifully. So thank you so much for your opportunity to jump on today. I look forward to having another conversation in the future here and pick up some of these threads. Maybe we can talk to the audience about our upcoming trip to New York and some of the things that happen there. And I'm looking forward to seeing you next week, Sophie.
Yes, same. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Grow Renaissance podcast. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe this episode. Remember, it will take a community of us to do the best in the world and truly nourish not only ourselves, but the planet, the atmosphere, the soil, the plants, and the animals on it. So make sure you spread this message anywhere that you can.